Our top story this hour, angered by the presence of overcrowded migrant camps in their area, locals in Lesbos blocked a road leading to the gutted Moria Camp. The locals are attempting to prevent access to machinery that could be used to rebuild the camp after it was destroyed in a fire. Moria, which has been under lockdown after 35 people tested positive for COVID-19 earlier this week, was home to an estimated 13,000 people.
Αγωνιόμαι, αισθανόμαστε ανασφαλείς, έχουμε απειδήσει, δεν ξέρουμε και οι ίδιοι πώς να φερθούμε. Προσπαθούμε να προστατευτούμε από πού, από τον κορονοϊό, από 1002 πράγματα. Είμαστε ψυχολογικά πολύ πεσμένοι.
According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, more than 4,000 children lived in the camp. The Moria refugee camp has almost been wiped out after a second fire destroyed nearly everything that had been spared in the original fire. New small fires also sprang up in the remains of the tents set up outside the camp on Thursday morning. Authorities said that both the fires in the camps were deliberately started. The first one was set by residents angered by quarantine measures imposed to contain a COVID-19 outbreak after 35 people tested positive. The fires have left about 3,500 living in and around Moria homeless.
One night, the fire came. My room is nothing like this. My family needs clothes, maybe some place to stay with, maybe food and water. There is nothing here, nothing.
Meanwhile, the homeless migrants scrambled to receive food and water being distributed. Migrants and refugees were cramming together outside food trucks, waiting for packages to be handed out. The homeless are sleeping on sidewalks, parks and on roadsides across the island. The government said it would take days to find housing for them. Coming to their rescue of these homeless refugees, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has now said that France and Germany will take in miners affected by the fire. Speaking at an event in Berlin, Merkel said that she had offered Germany's help to Greek Prime Minister.
Und gleichzeitig habe ich den griechischen Ministerpräsidenten gefragt, was können wir helfen? Und seine Bitte war, dass wir insbesondere die Minderjährigen, die jetzt ja auch auf das griechische Festland gebracht wurden, aufnehmen. Wir haben mit Frankreich Kontakt aufgenommen. Deutschland und Frankreich werden sich daran beteiligen. Ich hoffe, einige andere Mitgliedstaaten auch. Denn die Migration, das ist weder das Problem der Länder, bei denen Menschen ankommen, alleine. Es ist auch nicht alleine ein deutsches Problem. Wir haben die Ratspräsidentschaft. Und deshalb muss es noch mehr eine europäische Verantwortung werden.
We are now being joined by our correspondent Lucy Hugh live from Brussels. Lucy, thank you for joining us. To begin with, I would like to ask you, could you give us a little background as to what the situation is like right now and what has triggered such anger among the local residents?
Well, we're getting a sense of what conditions were like in the Moria camp on Lesbos. 13,000 people living in cramped and unhygienic conditions with that outbreak. As you mentioned there, we long anticipated that there would be outbreaks of the coronavirus in migrant camps or in situations of humanitarian crises, and so it proved. And this fire was deliberately started by migrants who were infuriated by the quarantine conditions that they were being asked to live under, and that the second fire that followed that initial one was also started deliberately. Since then, there are thousands of people who are sleeping under bridges, on streets, in temporary homeless accommodation, looking to be permanently housed, and Europe is calling for a cooperative, coordinated response to this. Greece in particular is saying that this is a European problem, not a Greek problem, that Europe must shoulder some of the responsibility. That has been echoed by German Chancellor Angela Merkel as well. She herself has agreed to take on 400 unaccompanied minors. And the Netherlands has also agreed to take on 50 children living in the camp, but some 4,000 under 18-year-olds were living in the conditions in Moria, on Lesbos. So many thousands of people who are displaced by what has happened in the last few days, and a really dire situation for those on the ground.
All right, so I know you mentioned this, but now this is not the first time that this has happened. So what do you think is the reason that authorities have been unable to up the security in the region or prevent something like this from happening?
I think the feeling is that Greek authorities have been inundated by this, that the scale of the camp that was in place there, and then of course the unprecedented circumstances of the coronavirus pandemic that made policing and law enforcement even more difficult in an already incredibly difficult humanitarian situation. Anger from those who are being forced to self-isolate, the difficulties of putting social distancing in place in a situation like a camp on the size of Moria with those 13,000 people. So, and we know for a long time that Greece has been calling for more resources, for more support from the European community to deal with this. It feels that it, as alongside Italy, has been forced to shoulder much of the blames, much of the responsibilities. So there is a push for, at the end of this month, Europe will be unveiling a new strategy on migrants that will aim to operate on a more unified, shared responsibility approach. But that has been delayed. That was meant to come at the start of this month, and certainly there are calls from many European nations at the moment for this to be a shared responsibility and for there to be a unified strategy in place so that it doesn't fall onto the shoulders of Greek authorities to deal with this.
Yes, so now that German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said that France and Germany will take in minors affected by the fire, what do you think the process is going to entail, and is there any resistance on that front?
Well, yeah, this is not something that has been an easy decision to make. It's not an easy decision to sell at home, and you'll notice that the people that have been agreed to be taken are unaccompanied minors. Angela Merkel, of course, faced some domestic criticism in the wake of the 2015 migrant crisis when she took in some 1 million migrants, and that was said to have fueled far-right politics at home and was damaging to her domestic political reputation. So it has been taken a bit of cajoling for France and Italy to agree to take on some migrants, but of course we know that the Netherlands is also going to be taking on 50 unaccompanied children. Germany itself will be taking on 400. And as I say, the European nations will be continuing to talk about this with the unified strategy to be unveiled at the end of this month.
All right. Lucy, thank you so much for joining us with all those details. We will definitely keep tracking this. Thank you for joining us.